Good news, everyone! Well, I'm not really sure if it's good news exactly, but news, everyone! The Vampire Berry plushies finally shipped! Yeah, I know, there was a little bit of a delay on that. It was unforeseen with the shipping. I'm sorry, it took like an extra 2 to 3 months to ship out, but people have finally been emailing me and telling me that like, hey, I finally got my vampire plushie, and all the ones I ordered arrived, so that's fantastic. I am now surrounded by a veritable gaggle. Gaggle, is that the correct term for a group of berries? I don't know. I'm surrounded by a gaggle of vampire berries right now, so that's great, I suppose, just in time for the Halloween season, so I don't know what I'm gonna do with all these vampire berries, honestly. It's kind of creeping me out a little bit, but just wanted to make an update about that they are finally shipping out, so if you haven't received yours yet, you should be very soon. Alright, so anyway, today's video, we're gonna be winding back the clock a little bit. We're gonna be going back around 40 years ago in the One Piece world. So there's a lot of stuff happening, all right, in the flashback, in a flashback, in a flashback, in a flashback. Let's go through the flashback layers right now, okay? So this whole thing started just because Hyrule needed to know how his dad died. You know, we could be dealing with the Gods Knights and Emu right now, but Hyrule just needed to know how his dad died, all right? So he asked Loki, and Loki started telling him a story about his past, which led into a story about Harald's past, because you can't learn about Loki's past until you learn about Harald's past. And of course, you can't learn about Harald's past until you learn about Rox's past, because they're intermingled, right? So then we gotta learn about Rox's past. And you can't learn about Rox's past until you learn about Shakuyaku's past. So now, we are in a flashback of Loki telling Hyrule about Harald, and Harald about Rox, and Rox's story involving Shakky. So we're like 4 layers deep right now, ladies and gentlemen. Are we ever going to get out of the flashback? I'm not complaining. This is an intense flashback, but in all of the mire of this, in all of the layers of the flashback, right, there's a lot of other stuff happening in the One Piece world. So I thought it would be important to get our bearings and talk about important stuff that was happening in the One Piece world in the same time frame as this flashback is in right now. We seem to be primarily focusing, I mean, Harald's backstory started like 109 years ago, right? Because he's a giant, so he lives longer. But for the last few chapters anyway, we've been primarily focused around 44 years ago to the formation of the Rox crew, and we're about 42 years ago right now as of the last chapter, and we're leading up to 38 years ago when the God Valley incident occurred, which the newest chapter has shed some light exactly on what the treasure was that the Rox pirates were after. I am not going to like immediately start talking about the most recent chapter. When I start discussing things that could be spoilers for chapter 1157, I'll let you know, and you can like pause the video there, and you could skip over that section or whatever you'd like. But let's just start with some baseline stuff. This is stuff that we've already learned either from data books or from other chapters, or chapters up to 1156. So like the previous chapter, not the one that just came out this week that I just did a review for, everything before that, okay? So let's begin 44 years ago, all right? So I'm going to go through events, and I'm also going to go through notable characters that were born during that time. Because, especially like we know Rox was introduced as the father of Blackbeard. Blackbeard is 40 years old, and right now we're 42 years ago in the past. So, at some point, Blackbeard's going to be born soon. Who is Blackbeard's mom? We do not know. So it's that kind of stuff that we're going to be talking about, all right? So 44 years ago, let's start there. That is when Rox officially formed his crew. At the end of chapter 1156, they were at Hachinosu. They had just taken it over. Rox had remodeled the skull, well, the fish mountain, to make a skull. And we see Charlotte Linlin and Kaido and Edward Newgate and Stussy and Gansui and Wang Ji and Don Marlin. And we see all of these people gathering together under Rox's banner. Kyo the Hitman, who would later be known as Silver Axe, the rival of Shiki the Golden Lion, he arrived at the island as well, and all these really strong characters are being gravitated toward Hachinosu to join Rox's crew, okay? So that was when that occurred. Also, coincidentally, was the same year that Odin started the Harem Wars back at Wano. I'm not saying anything here has to connect back to everything else. I'm just saying what was going on during that time period. Odin started the harem wars. That happened. Now, in terms of some notable births from that particular year, Dawn Krieg was born 44 years ago, which I only bring up as a notable thing because Kyo, Silver Axe, people have said he looks a lot like Zephyr, which I definitely agree with. People have also said that maybe he's like the grandfather of Drake. We know Diaz Drake's father was Diaz Barrels. Maybe Kyo was the father of Diaz Barrels. I guess that could work. Yeah, that could work in the timeline. So maybe that's Drake's grandfather. I'm not sure. But also, the similarities with Krieg do not go unnoticed. So I don't know. Krieg was born 44 years ago. Maybe he was related to Silver Axe in some way. Some other births during that year, we have Kyros. I don't know if there's anything connecting there with him. Morgan, as in the original Captain Morgan. Shiryu. Yeah, Shiryu has always been, like, even though he had the job working in Impel Down, it was always really, obvious that he was, like, evil at heart. Like, he just wanted to, like, murder the prisoners and everything like that. So, he honestly seems like he would have ended up as a pirate or an outlaw anyway. It's just that the government, maybe through some circumstances with Shiryu, were like, hey, you're really good at killing people. How about you come and become a prison guard for us? And he's just like, yeah, all right. Do I get to kill the prisoners? It's like, well, you're not supposed to, but, and then Magellan, knocked that shit off and, like, threw him in a jail cell and everything like that, and now Shiryu is a member of the Blackbeard Pirates, so there it is that. So that was 44 years ago. And then, like I said, there's some other characters that were born, but I'm not going to go through, like, every single one, especially, like, all of Big Mom's children, because, like, every single year, a lot of Big Mom's children are born as well. Moving forward to 43 years ago, this was sort of a year we sort of skipped over in the chapters. We didn't really focus 43 years ago too much. We kind of went to 44 years ago when Rock's crew started, and then sort of moved over to 42 years ago where the next list of notable events occurred. But 43 years ago is when Clap and his wife and Kuma were discovered by the world government and were arrested and taken to Marijois to be slaves because of their being the Buccaneers, right? Okay, well, Clap's wife was not a Buccaneer. We still don't know what Kuma's mom's name was, which was weird to me. I feel like we should have learned her name. But they get taken to Marijois. That happened. It was also the same year Katakuri, at only the age of 5, ate the Mochi Mochi no Mi and became a Mochi Man, all right? So that was 43 years ago. But more interesting is Mihawk was born 43 years ago. Who was Mihawk's dad? Who was Mihawk's mom? Who trained him in the art of the sword? I don't know. See, that's the thing. Like, a lot of, if not the, like, top 5 strongest characters in the story right now were born in this, like, 5 or 6 year window between 44 years ago when the Rocks Pirates were formed all the way to God Valley 38 years ago. From this 6 year window, a lot of heavy hitters are born. So we didn't see anything involving Mihawk in the chapters. Maybe that's why Oda kind of skipped over the 43 years. He's like, well, we don't want to see, we're not ready yet for Mihawk's backstory. We'll get to that in a moment. But that is when Mihawk was born. Also, it was when Mont Blanc Cricket was born, as well as Kazekage, Gaara's father, was born. No, not that Kazekage. This Kazekage. He was a member of the Oniwabanshu under Orochi. He was a ninja. So, yeah, not the exact same Kazekage. But I do find it funny that the character's name is just Kazekage. I mean, it just means wind shadow. It's a cool ninja name. But, the similarities and references to Naruto do not go unnoticed, right? Okay. 42 years ago. This is where we might get into some spoilers involving Chapter 1157, because this involves, 42. That's when the chapter focused on. So just letting you know about that here. Okay, so this is the year Boodle started up the colony on Orangetown when they left their own area and they started up their own town, and then eventually Buggy would take over years later, right? It's also the year, now this is something interesting. Shakky mentioned at the Sabaody Archipelago when the Straw Hats first met her, when they ended up in Grove 13 and they went into the Rip-Off Bar, and Hachan was introducing everybody to Shakky. Shakky said to Luffy, hey, you're Garp's grandson. he chased me around 40 years ago. I used to be a pirate, but I quit that to open a bar. Now, 40 years ago, that lines up exactly, because 40 years ago, with the time skip, because this was before the time skip when Shakky was telling Luffy this, so that was 40 years ago exactly. So the timeline does line up. However, we always assumed Shakky was opening the rip-off bar at the Sabaody Archipelago, but she didn't. She opened the bar originally on Hachinosu. And you know what's interesting? I did not notice this. I should have put this as a note in the review, because I did notice it while I was editing it. The bar on Hachinosu is the same bar on the Sabaody Archipelago. The architecture is exactly the same. The way that the door is, like the door frame and the roof, although there is one exception. On the Sabaody Archipelago, there seems to be like a large like orb or like an addition to the bar on top of it that wasn't present at Hachinosu. But in terms of the base structure, and we can assume from what like the pirates did, like when Shakuyaku arrived at Hachinosu, she was like, I want to open a small business. I want to open a bar. And then can you help me with that? And then all the pirates immediately were dumbstruck by her beauty. And they were like, absolutely, madam. Absolutely, goddess. We will build you a bar post-haste. And then they actually built her like a bar from scratch. And they put like every single ounce of dedication into that bar, right? The bar looks exactly the same in terms of the overall architecture, like the shape of the building and everything like that. So it really does seem like, yes, at one point, the bar got physically moved from Hachinosu to the Sabaody Archipelago at Grove 13. How could such a building have moved like that? Well, if only we had, like, a large person, like a giant or something. But giants don't exist in One Piece. That's absolutely absurd, as I flail my arms around weirdly. It's like, yeah, so maybe Harold or another giant physically picked up the bar and placed it in the Sabaody Archipelago. There's other ways that it could be moved as well. Shakky has the ability of the float fruit. I'm pretty sure we saw him utilize that power in the last chapter. I didn't bring that up, but yeah, it does seem like he was floating around there when he was throwing the bomb down the shaft, you know, as you do. So maybe that happened, or I don't know, maybe they physically, you know, they could have just moved the bar. Like, that even happens today. Like, you've ever been driving on a highway and you see like a big truck carrying a house? Like, they can ship houses. They might have just picked up the bar, put it on a ship, moved it to Archipelago, and she placed it on Grove 13, right? Like, it's not impossible that just normal humans could have done that, but this is the One Piece world where things are fantastical and whatnot. So, yeah, I'm thinking they moved the bar. They physically, like, picked it up and then, like, moved it somewhere else like a giant did, right? Okay? So, 42 years ago, we also have Beiji being born. Maybe he's the son of Don Marlin. I don't think he needs to be the son of Don Marlin necessarily, but if he is, then this is the year he was born. Alvaro Pizarro was born this year. Jozu was born, the current 3rd Division. Well, I guess not anymore because there's no more Whitebeard Pirates, but used to be the 3rd Division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates. And Okiku was also born this year, okay? So nothing super crazy in terms of the births. You know, I mean, we have a member of the Supernovas. We have Beiji, and Don Marlin is there. So maybe you can make a connection with that, but nothing crazy there. But the big thing to take away the 42 years ago is what Shakky was saying about the bar and how it was like it moved locations somehow, right? So keep that in mind. There's going to be something there with that. Next up, 41 years ago. So kind of moving beyond the last chapter, so leading up to God Valley here. 41 years ago is when Odin's backstory starts. So we see him eating the Odin out of Katsuzo's like charred cremations. Remember that? And it's also when the Mountain God incident occurred. 41 years ago, Spondum was born. Everybody's favorite character, Spondum. Arlong was born. Doflamingo was born. Lafitte was born, the navigator of the Blackbeard Pirates, the demon sheriff, and Aramaki, current Admiral Green Bull, was born 41 years ago. Green Bull is interesting because he is the youngest person to be an admiral. Like, every other admiral we know about is at least in their 50s. It seems most of them are in their 50s. Kuzan was in his late 40s, but Aramaki is, like, barely 40 years old. and he is already an admiral. Now, it makes a little bit more sense given the fact that Akainu was like doing the draft and he was looking for really strong people, and so Fujitora is in his 50s. But then like Aramaki's really strong. It's like, okay, he has a Logia. All right, he meets all the qualifications. Let's bring him in, right? And yeah, there's some problems with him, but yeah, he was born 41 years ago. All right, now, 40 years ago. This is when Marshall D. Teach, this is when Blackbeard was born, okay? Who was the mother of Blackbeard? Now, given the last chapter, the fact that not just Rox, but pretty much every guy on the island was smitten with Shakuyaku, it brings up a question of, and people have said this, I've seen it, it's like, what if Rox and Shakuyaku got together and that's how Blackbeard was born? I don't know. Once again, Oda did reveal sketch art a while ago for Blackbeard's mother and his sisters, but I think he, like, scrapped that as an idea. He could bring it back, but maybe he was like, no, I have another idea here, or he might not go into it at all. But at some point here, Rox is going to be a dad, all right? Within the next 2 years after Shakuyaku arriving on the island, Rox is going to be a daddy, so maybe we'll get to see who exactly the mother of Marshall D. Teach was. Not really sure. Definitely definitely Blackbeard seems to have taken after his father more than anything, given his, like, ambitions and all that, and also they just look, like, remarkably similar to one another, right? So very interesting. Keep that in mind. Iceberg, Belmere, Ippon Matsu was also born. I made sure to include my man, Ippon Matsu. Great character. Fantastic character. Can't wait for him to show up again. Also, Nekamamushi and Inuarashi were born 40 years ago. Exactly. Okay. But the big notable one is, of course, Marshall D. Teach. Okay. Then, 39 years ago. So now a year before God Valley. This is something I did not write down, but it's something I'm just remembering. When Roger arrived at God Valley, so, they show up purportedly to get Shakky and bring her back, okay, because she was taken by the world nobles to God Valley. Didn't Roger say something along the lines of, I've been waiting a year for this, or it's been a whole year already, something like that? Not really sure what he meant by that. If that was the case, then maybe Shakuyaku was taken by the world government a year prior to God Valley, and they just did not know where she was exactly, or maybe she was at Marijois. They couldn't all invade Marijois. But then again, given Shakuyaku's divine beauty and how everybody was obsessed, you'd think that even if she was taken into the bowels of Castle Pangea as a slave, like Rox and the Roger Pirates and everybody would have just mobilized on the Red Line. Like, we don't even care anymore. We don't get, like, everybody starts being Fisher Tiger and starts climbing the damn walls, you know what I mean? Rox was able to make it into Marijois by himself way back during the Reverie. Maybe they boosted security since then. I'm not really sure. But I don't feel like Shakuyaku would have been, like, kidnapped by the government for a full year for them to finally make their move. Not really sure. But didn't Roger say something akin to, like, it's been a whole year already, indicating this year, 39 years ago. So this was the year, from a Vivara card, we learned that Mads was formed. I say it's Vivara card information, so, right now it's canon. Oda might change it later. It's like data book stuff. Not really sure exactly if Oda sat down and came up with that exact year, but at any rate, right now, we have 39 years ago, Vegapunk and Cyan, who is Queen, founded Mads, or were founding members of Mads. Not sure if they were the only two, although it does kind of make sense at the beginning, because Vegapunk the way he is, and then Queen the way he is, those two got together first, and were like, hey, let's form an organization, and then that became Mads, and then maybe Judge and Caesar and Stussy joined later. It's very possible there. Now, maybe this is what Roger was referring to, because 39 years ago was the year that Roger found Lodestar. So this is something very interesting. Before Shanks and Buggy were even born, Roger had already finished the Grand Line route, like the log pose route of going from island to island to island, reaching the final island the log points to, Lodestar. Roger had already reached that point. And at Lodestar is when they learned about the existence of, wait a minute, there's one more island, Laughtail. Where? Well, they don't even know it's Laugh-Tale yet because they're the ones that named it. It's like, there's one more place to go. You need to collect the 4 road poneglyphs. You've unlocked New Game Plus, Roger. You've unlocked the bonus quest. All right? So maybe that's what Roger was referring to when they arrived at God Valley. Like, I've been waiting a year for this, or it's been a year since I've conquered the Grand Line, since I've reached the end, and now I'm at God Valley to rescue Shakuyaku or you know, something. I guess. I don't know. But yeah, I guess, yeah, the same year that Shanks and Buggy were born, I should say, is the year Roger had already reached the end of the Grand Line and he was trying to find the road poneglyphs now. And so for the remaining 13, 14-ish years of his pirate career, that was all spent just finding the poneglyphs. So I think the Straw Hats are making pretty good time, all things considered. I think maybe that's the reason why we're following Luffy and the Straw Hats in this story and not Roger as the protagonist. Somebody had to establish all this shit first. And then Luffy is like, oh, okay, well, we can pick up where kind of Roger left off sort of thing, right? Okay. So anyway, 39 years ago, Shanks and, I guess, Shamrock were born at the same time. Shamrock is the older of the twins. He was born first, and then Shanks. Then Buggy was born. And then also, interestingly enough, Eneru was born 39 years ago. Maybe he's going to show up and be like, I was the triplet. I goes Shanks, Shamrock, and then it was Eneru. Maybe he was adopted. I don't know, but like Eneru was also born 39 years ago, so that's something. And now finally we reach 38 years ago, God Valley. Big giant war. The Gods Knights were there, Celestial Dragons were there, Roger was there, and if Roger was there, you know Garp's gonna roll up. And then also the Rocks Pirates were there at the height of their power, a lot of chaos occurred, and an island was effectively wiped off the face of the map. And also this is where Rocks purportedly died. A little while ago when I was doing the Rocks tier list, I was actually curious. I asked the question to my audience, like, what exactly, like, what terminology did Sengoku use when describing God Valley and the death of Rocks? Did he straight up say, Rocks died at God Valley? Because I don't remember it being that direct. I remember it being a little bit more, like, dramatic than that. And I actually got a really great comment right here that answered my question, so thank you. Sengoku said in chapter 957 that Rocks is no longer in this world. The Japanese expression he used was this, which is a slightly archaic or regional sounding way of saying someone has passed away or is no longer alive. It is a poetic or slightly old-fashioned way to say someone has died. So that's the kind of way Sengoku says it. I'm going to take that to mean Rocks is currently dead. Or, at the very least, if he is still around in, like, Blackbeard, multiple souls theory, stuff like that, he's not in his physical body still around doing things the way that he did back in the day, right? Like, that's the way I'm taking it. So, yeah, Sengoku was like, yeah, he's no longer of this world, is kind of the way he said it, right? Not just straight up like, yeah, Garp and Roger teamed up and they, like, you know, decapitated Rocks and he died right in front of him. It wasn't that visceral or direct and of an explanation, but it was something along the same lines, right? Okay, so that was God Valley. Also, Garling was mentioned to be the champion of God Valley. He was lauded as the winner of that game. Later on, this is where Kuma and Ivankov and Ginny met each other during that event, and then Kuma eats the pawpaw fruit and escapes with like 500 people and saves them along the way. Big Mom gets her hands on the Azure Dragon Fruit. Kaido is about to die, I guess, at that time. We don't really know how that went down. And then she gave him the Devil Fruit in order for him to survive, which incurred the life debt. And so Morgans, Big News Morgans, at age 15, has his big break, his big journalism scoop, I guess, by reporting on the events of God Valley. So the people of the One Piece world did read in the newspaper that God Valley did occur, but it was a very watered down, sanitized version of that story, as it were, where basically, we don't even really know what the article said, but we all know that, like, Garp's heroics were the only thing that were properly reported from God Valley. So the only thing that even comes kind of true from the article that Morgans published was Garp was a badass and was a hero, which we all know that. Garp is a badass, and he was a hero of the Marines, and he did fight with honor and justice and all that stuff, but everything involving Roger was left out. I don't even know if the newspaper even reported on the name of rocks. They might have changed the name or just left it out. They might have just had the article as, there was a big battle at God Valley, and Garp was there, and he killed a bunch of pirates. That might have been the article. That might be all the things that the One Piece world citizens know about, but they knew at least about a version of God Valley. They know the name God Valley, and they know that Garp was there and beat the shit out of some pirates. It's probably the extent the public knows. Also keep in mind, this was a news story that was published 38 years ago in the One Piece world, so a lot of people now, currently in the story, probably don't remember this particular article too much, but it was published, okay? So there's that. In terms of births this year, we have Foxy. Is Foxy gonna turn out to be relevant? God dang it. Vasco Shot was also born. Hachan was born. And Who's Who was born. Also Charlotte Montdor, who was Big Mom's child. So I'm not really sure if Big Mom was pregnant with Montdor or if Montdor was a newborn baby at the time of God Valley. One or the other. I'm not sure how Big Mom, like, synced up her pregnancies and stuff like that, because we never really see her pregnant. We just see, like, children, as Gloriosa said in the last chapter, keep popping out like popcorn all over the place, right? But yeah. Montdor was born. What a hell of a year to be born, let me tell you. It was a thing. That's the reason Montdor is, like, dressing like a clown, like the Joker. That's the thing that messed him up. That traumatized him. He was born. He saw shit. Like, first thing he saw after being born was God Valley. That messed him up permanently, right? So, yeah, that was the events there. So, yeah, I just wanted to go through 44 years ago to 38 years ago and just talk about this time period, and more than anything open up a discussion with you, my audience and everything, of like, oh, maybe this character being born at this time does line up to stuff. Maybe Shaku Yaku moving the bar here at this point does line up with this. Rocks at the end of the chapter was also asking Harold to, like, join his crew finally, and then the Gorosei were talking about, hey, have Harold kill Rocks, and then Harold and Elbaf can be part of the world government. What decision is Harold gonna make? That kind of stuff leading into the current story, right? So let me know down below what you make of all this. I just provided, like, where we're at and where we are going. Thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Teching, signing out.